My name is Madeline Hayes, I'm 36 years old, and for most of my life I've been the girl people forget to mention in family photos. If you've ever grown up with a sibling who could do no wrong, you'll understand the story I'm about to tell. And if you haven't, well, maybe this will make you thankful you didn't. From the outside, our house in Cleveland, Ohio looked ordinary. White siding, a squeaky screen door, the kind of place where neighbors waved as they mowed their lawns. Inside, though, the walls seemed to echo one name louder than all others, Ethan. Ethan Hayes. My older brother. My parents' pride. The chosen one, though no one ever used those words aloud, they didn't have to. You could hear it in their tone whenever they said his name. At dinner, my father would lean back in his chair, beer in hand, and grin as he said, "That boy is going places. A natural-born leader." My mother would add, "He's destined for something big. Ethan has that spark." And then they'd glance at me, fork halfway to my mouth, and say, "Maddie's sweet. She helps around the house." Do you know what sweet feels like when you're 12 years old and desperate to matter? It doesn't feel like love. It feels like being patted on the head like a dog that fetched the paper. I still remember the night of Ethan's first basketball game in high school. The whole family crammed into the bleachers, cheering until our throats went raw. He scored 2 points the entire game, but you'd think he'd hit the winning shot at the state championship. My parents bought pizza on the way home, celebrating like he was a star. That same week, I had won the district spelling bee. No pizza. No celebration. Just a quick, "Good job, Maddie," before Dad asked Ethan about practice. Moments like that don't just sting in the moment, they carve little scars that stay with you. You start to learn that your victories don't matter unless they somehow orbit your brother's world. And so, I got quiet. Quieter than a teenager should be. While Ethan filled rooms with his laughter and his stories, I filled journals with equations, ideas, codes scribbled in the margins of my notebooks. I discovered early on that if no one cared about my words at the table, at least the pages would listen. But even my silence was treated like a flaw. I remember my mom once telling a neighbor, "Maddie's shy. Not like Ethan. He's so confident." She said it like shyness was a disease, something shameful. I wanted to scream, "I'm not shy. I'm invisible because you made me invisible." But I didn't. I swallowed the words, like I always did. You might wonder, did Ethan ever notice? Did he ever see the difference in how we were treated? The truth is, I don't know. Maybe he liked the attention too much to question it. Maybe he thought I preferred the shadows. Or maybe he just didn't care. There was one afternoon when I thought things might be different. I was 16, sitting on the porch steps with my acceptance letter to a summer coding program at Ohio State. My hands trembled as I showed my dad, thinking maybe, finally, this would be something he'd be proud of. He barely skimmed the letter. "That's nice, honey. But don't you think you should try something more practical? Teaching maybe? Nursing? You know, something steady." And then Ethan walked in, tossing his sweaty basketball jersey on the couch, and Dad lit up like the 4th of July. "How was practice, champ?" The letter crumpled a little in my hand. That night, I sat in my room, staring at the acceptance paper. For the first time, I realized, if I wanted to be seen, it would never come from them. I'd have to build something so undeniable, so unignorable, that even they couldn't look away. But at 16, I didn't know what that was yet. All I knew was the ache of being overlooked and the quiet fire of wanting more. Looking back now, I think the years of being invisible shaped me more than I realized. They taught me how to observe, how to notice the small details people miss. They taught me patience, because silence forces you to wait and watch. And most importantly, they planted this seed of determination, a hunger to prove, not to them, but to myself, that I was more than sweet Maddie who helps around the house. And maybe that's why, years later, when I built something extraordinary, I didn't tell them. Not at first. Maybe I wanted to see how far I could go without their validation. Or maybe, deep down, I knew that no matter what I achieved, they'd still find a way to make it about Ethan. But that's getting ahead of myself. Because before I could build a company, before I could stand in a room and be applauded for my work, I had to survive the years where I was nothing more than a shadow in my own home. And surviving, as I learned, is its own kind of power. By the time I turned 22, I had learned the art of invisibility so well it felt like second nature. In family gatherings, I could slip in and out of conversations without anyone noticing. At Christmas dinners, my presence was like the background music, nice enough to fill the silence, but never the reason people clapped. After high school, Ethan went straight to business school in New York. My parents bragged about him to everyone, neighbors, church members, even the cashier at the grocery store. Ethan's studying finance at one of the best schools in the country. That boy is destined for Wall Street. And me? I got into a state university on a scholarship for computer science. When I told my parents, they nodded politely. That's good, Maddie. Computers are everywhere now. Then my dad added, almost as an afterthought, but don't overwork yourself. You don't need to prove anything. But that's where he was wrong. I did need to prove something, not to them, maybe not even to Ethan, but to myself. The early years in Chicago were brutal. I worked a regular IT job by day, barely scraping enough to cover rent, and then I coded through the night on an idea I couldn't shake. I wanted to build a platform that could help small businesses make sense of their financial data, something simple, efficient, powerful. I called it Hayes Analytics, though no one knew it was mine. My apartment was a shoebox with peeling paint, but to me it was a laboratory. Pizza boxes stacked by the desk, sticky notes on the walls, my laptop glowing at 2 a.m. while the city outside hummed with life I couldn't afford to join. I wasn't out at bars or clubs, I was debugging code, writing pitches, emailing potential investors who didn't know or care who I was. And slowly, piece by piece, it started to take shape. There's something intoxicating about building in silence. No one expects anything from you, so every small win feels like a private revolution. The first time a local bakery signed up to use my software, I cried. It wasn't the money, it was proof. Proof that my invisible work could create visible results. But still, I didn't tell my parents. Why would I? I could already hear the response, that's nice, Maddie. But what's Ethan up to? So I let them keep talking about Ethan's internships, Ethan's promotions, Ethan's so-called bright future. Meanwhile, I was burning through savings, living on black coffee and instant noodles, trying to keep my little spark alive. There were nights when I almost gave up. Nights when the code broke, when the bank account dipped too close to zero, when I thought, maybe Dad was right. Maybe I should have chosen something steady. But then I'd remember that letter from Ohio State, the way it crumpled in my hand while Dad asked Ethan about practice. That memory burned like gasoline, pushing me forward. After 3 years of struggle, something incredible happened. Investors started saying yes. Real money. Real opportunities. Within a year, Hayes Analytics had grown from a solo project in my dingy apartment to a real company with employees, clients, and office space. And the irony? Ethan's financial firm became one of our earliest clients. I remember walking into that first meeting, my company's name on the slides, the executives nodding along as I explained features Ethan himself didn't even understand. He sat there, shifting uncomfortably, pretending to be the expert while my software carried him. And still, I said nothing. I didn't announce that Hayes Analytics was mine. I didn't correct anyone when they assumed I was just a consultant. Because here's the truth, invisibility had become my shield. As long as I stayed quiet, I couldn't be criticized. As long as I stayed hidden, my family couldn't belittle what they couldn't see. But silence has a cost. Every month, I sent money home to help my parents cover their mortgage when Dad's hours got cut at work. I helped Ethan pay rent when he accidentally overspent on vacations or designer suits. I even bought my mom a new car when hers broke down, letting her believe it was some company perk I'd stumbled into. And not once, did anyone ask, "Maddie, how are you affording this?" They just took. They assumed. They nodded and said, "Thank you, sweetheart. You're such a good girl." That phrase again, good girl. As if my worth was in how quietly I gave, not in who I was or what I had built. I told myself I didn't care. That their ignorance was protection, that it gave me freedom to keep building without pressure. But deep down, it hurt. Every time Ethan bragged about his bonuses or my parents glowed about his achievements, I wanted to scream, "Do you realize you're praising him for projects built on my work?" But I didn't scream. I smiled. I stayed invisible. People ask me sometimes why I never confronted them sooner. Why I let the imbalance fester for so long. And the only answer I have is this: when you grow up invisible, part of you believes that's where you belong. That maybe silence is safer than the risk of rejection. But silence can't last forever. And as Hayes Analytics grew, millions in revenue, partnerships with firms across the country, a reputation that spread through the industry, my silence began to crack. Because no matter how hard I tried to hide, success has a way of dragging you into the light. And that light, as I was about to learn, would expose everything. By the time I was 35, Hayes Analytics wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. We had offices in 2 cities, contracts with firms I used to dream of working for, and a client list that read like the who's who of finance. I should have been proud. And I was, in quiet moments, when I let myself breathe. But I hadn't told my parents, not really. They knew I worked in computers. That's what they told neighbors when asked. "Maddie does something with computers. Ethan's in finance, you know, real important work." I'd hear that on phone calls, biting my tongue. Real important work. As if mine wasn't. So when my mom called one Saturday afternoon, her voice sharp like it always was when she was nervous, I wasn't expecting what came next. "We're having a dinner," she said. "Ethan's boss and some colleagues are coming. It's important for his career. Just, if you come, don't mention you're related to him. It might confuse things." I froze. "Don't mention you're his sister. Do you know what it feels like for your own mother to say that? As if your existence is a blemish, a distraction." I almost said no. Almost hung up. But something inside me, maybe that 16-year-old girl still holding the crumpled acceptance letter, said, "Go. Show up. Not for them, but for yourself." The restaurant was one of those upscale places with low lighting and wine glasses that clinked too loudly. I wore a black dress, simple but sharp, because I knew if I came in jeans, Mom would sigh and Dad would shake his head. When I arrived, the table was already buzzing. Ethan sat at the center, of course, laughter booming, his hands flying as he told a story. My parents sat beside him, glowing like they'd raised a prodigy. I slipped into a chair near the end, almost unnoticed. Old habits die hard. Ethan was in his element. He talked about his project, some massive fintech overhaul that his firm had landed. He described strategies, frameworks, insights, dropping buzzwords like candy at a parade. Everyone at the table nodded, impressed. And I sat there, a fork in my hand, listening to my brother take credit for work I knew intimately. Because that project, the one keeping Ethan's firm afloat, it was powered by Hayes Analytics. My company. My sleepless nights. My sacrifice. I sipped my water, saying nothing. The first hour dragged by in a blur of laughter, wine, and Ethan's voice filling every corner. My parents looked at him like he was the sun itself. I wondered, not for the first time, if they even remembered I was at the table. Then dessert came. Glasses refilled. And Ethan's boss, a man named Mr. Carver with salt and pepper hair and a booming voice, stood to make a toast. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate not just our team, but the brilliance that made this project possible. Ethan, you've been a great liaison, but let's be honest, the real genius behind this success is Hayes Analytics. And the person responsible for Hayes Analytics is sitting right here, at this very table. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the founder herself, Madeline Hayes." Time slowed. Forks clinked against plates. Heads turned. Suddenly every pair of eyes in that room was on me. Applause broke out. Hands reached across the table to shake mine. "Incredible work. We've heard so much about your software. You're revolutionizing the industry." I smiled, heat rising in my chest. Not embarrassment, validation. After years of silence, years of invisibility, here I was, undeniable. And then I looked at my family. Ethan's face drained of color. His smile froze, brittle and thin. My father stared at me like he'd never seen me before. My mother's mouth opened, then shut, then opened again, no words forming. For the first time in my life, they were speechless. I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. I simply thanked Mr. Carver, shook hands, answered questions. But inside, a storm was raging. Part of me wanted to scream, "See me now. Do you finally see me?" Another part whispered, "It won't matter. They'll still find a way to make this about Ethan." When the dinner ended, people congratulated me, asked for business cards, clapped me on the back. Ethan avoided my gaze. My parents left in stiff silence, their smiles brittle for the guests but gone the moment we stepped outside. In the parking lot, my mother hissed, "Why didn't you tell us?" I stared at her. "Would you have listened if I had?" She looked away. My father muttered something about being blindsided, about appearances. Ethan stormed to his car without a word. And me? I drove home, hands shaking on the wheel, my mind replaying the moment Mr. Carver said my name. For once, I wasn't invisible. For once, the room had turned to me. But I knew, deep down, that the real fallout hadn't even begun. Because when a family builds their identity around one golden child, the moment another star rises, it doesn't just shift the balance. It threatens to shatter the entire foundation. And mine was about to crack wide open. The morning after the dinner, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. At first, I thought it was just the usual flood of emails from clients or team members. But when I squinted at the screen, it wasn't work. It was family. Missed calls from Mom. Voicemails from Dad. Texts from Ethan, some short, some long, all of them frantic. My inbox, usually filled with investor updates and project proposals, now had subject lines like, "Call us now," and "We need to talk." I sat up slowly, my chest heavy. For one naive moment, I let myself imagine they might be calling to say they were proud of me. That after years of being invisible, they had finally seen me. But no. When I opened the first voicemail, Mom's voice cracked through the speaker. "Maddie, you blindsided us last night. We didn't even know you were successful. Why didn't you tell us? Anyway, Ethan's going through a tough time at work. Maybe you could help smooth things over. Call me back." The second voicemail was Dad. "You embarrassed Ethan. He looked like a fool in front of his boss. Family doesn't do that to family. The least you can do is help him land on his feet. He's your brother, Maddie. Don't forget that." And then Ethan's texts. Dozens of them. Some angry, "You stole the spotlight. You always wanted to drag me down." Some desperate, "I need money for rent this month. You've got plenty. Just help me out until I find another job." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. Not one message said, "We're proud of you." Not one acknowledged the years I'd carried them quietly on my back. Every word boiled down to the same refrain: "What can you do for Ethan?" For the first time in my life, I didn't reply. Instead, I walked into the office, where my team greeted me with smiles and updates, oblivious to the storm brewing in my personal life. On the outside, I was CEO of a growing fintech firm. On the inside, I was a little girl again, standing in the shadow of Ethan's glow, waiting for scraps of acknowledgement that would never come. By lunchtime, the calls hadn't stopped. I finally silenced my phone and let it buzz itself into exhaustion on my desk. But ignoring them didn't stop the reality that hit me 2 weeks later: Ethan had been demoted. And not long after, he was let go entirely. Apparently, once his boss realized how little he understood the technology he'd been bragging about, the truth became undeniable. Hayes Analytics was carrying him. Without us, he was just Ethan. And who did the family blame? Not Ethan. Me. The night Ethan lost his job, my parents called again. This time, my father's voice wasn't angry, it was pleading. "Maddie, your brother's struggling. He needs a chance. Why don't you bring him into your company? You must have a role for him. Something to keep him steady." I swallowed hard, gripping the phone. "Dad, Hayes Analytics isn't a charity. Ethan doesn't have the skills." "Then train him," he barked. "You're smart. You can show him what to do. He's family. You can't just leave him out in the cold." I closed my eyes. Years of quiet sacrifice surged up inside me, paying their bills, covering Ethan's rent, buying the car, the mortgage checks. And none of it mattered. They hadn't seen me then, and they weren't seeing me now. They just saw what I could provide. That night, I opened my banking app and canceled every automatic transfer. The monthly payments to my parents. The rent deposits to Ethan's account. All of it. My hand trembled as I hit confirm, but afterward, an unfamiliar calm washed over me. For once, I wasn't their safety net. For once, I wasn't the invisible daughter paying silently to earn crumbs of affection. Of course, the fallout was immediate. Ethan showed up at my apartment the next day, eyes wild, fists clenched. "You ruined my career," he spat. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. And now you're cutting me off. What kind of sister does that?" I let him rage. I let him pace, his voice echoing off my walls. And when he finally stopped, chest heaving, I said quietly, "I didn't humiliate you, Ethan. Your boss gave me credit for my work. That's all. I didn't ask for it. I didn't steal anything from you. You built your career on my silence, and now that silence is over." He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "You're supposed to help me," he whispered. "That's what family does." I thought of all the times I'd written checks, transferred funds, taken calls at midnight to bail him out. I thought of the spelling bee, the acceptance letter, the dinners where my achievements were brushed aside. And I said the words I never thought I'd say. "Family also respects you, Ethan. And you've never respected me." His face twisted, part anger, part hurt. He left without another word. In the weeks that followed, the calls from my parents grew sharper. "How could you abandon your brother? We raised you better than this. Money isn't everything, Madeline." And maybe they were right, money isn't everything. But acknowledgement, respect, those are worth more than any paycheck. For the first time, I stopped trying to buy their love. And though the silence that followed was painful, it was also freeing. Because here's the truth: when you've lived your whole life in someone else's shadow, stepping into the light is terrifying. But once you do, you realize you were never meant to stay hidden. And the light? It doesn't just expose the truth, it burns away everything that was never real to begin with. It was a Tuesday evening when the knock came. Sharp. Heavy. The kind of knock that doesn't wait for an answer. I'd just gotten home from the office, kicked off my heels, and microwaved leftovers when the pounding started again. My stomach sank before I even reached the door. I knew who it was. When I opened it, there stood Ethan. His once polished suit was wrinkled, tie hanging loose, eyes bloodshot as if sleep had been a stranger for days. He looked less like the golden boy my parents worshipped and more like a man unraveling at the seams. "We need to talk," he said, pushing past me before I could respond. He paced my living room like a caged animal, hands raking through his hair. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" he demanded. "I've lost everything. My job, my reputation, my future. All because you couldn't stay in your lane." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Ethan, I didn't do this to you. I didn't say a word at that dinner. Your boss gave me credit for my work. That's it. Don't you dare spin this," he snapped, eyes blazing. "You stole the spotlight. You humiliated me. Do you know what it feels like to have the rug pulled out from under you in front of your boss, your colleagues, your parents? You enjoyed it. I saw your face. You liked watching me fall." His words hit like shards of glass, but beneath the anger, I saw it, fear. Desperation. The golden boy stripped of his shine. "Ethan," I said softly, "you built your career on pretending to know things you didn't. On letting me do the work while you took the credit. That was never sustainable." He stopped pacing, turned on me like a storm. "You're supposed to have my back. You're my sister. Family protects family." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "Family also acknowledges each other, Ethan. Do you have any idea how it felt to grow up invisible while you soaked up all the praise? Do you remember when I won the spelling bee and no one cared? When I got into that summer program and Dad told me to choose something practical? When I sent money for years and you never once asked how I could afford it? Protect you. Who protected me?" The words spilled out before I could stop them. Years of silence breaking like a dam. For the first time in forever, Ethan didn't have a comeback. His mouth opened, then closed, his face twisting between anger and shame. Finally, his shoulders sagged, and his voice cracked. I don't know what to do," he whispered. "I can't pay rent. I can't find another job. No one's calling me back. I'm drowning, Maddie." And there it was, the crack in the armor. Not anger. Not pride. Just raw fear. For a moment, the sister in me ached. I saw the boy I'd grown up with, the one who used to sneak cookies with me after bedtime, the one who sat on the porch steps telling me scary stories until I laughed myself to tears. I wanted to reach out, to tell him it would be okay. But then I remembered every ignored achievement, every dinner where my name was an afterthought, every time my worth was measured only by what I could give him. "Ethan," I said gently but firmly, "I can't rescue you anymore. I can't keep carrying you while you refuse to stand on your own." His eyes widened, wet with unshed tears. "So that's it. You're just going to abandon me?" "No," I said. "I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference. I love you, but love doesn't mean enabling your mistakes." He shook his head violently, backing away as if my words were poison. "You've changed. Success has made you cold." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "No. Success has made me visible. And visibility means I finally get to say no." He stood there for a long moment, the silence thick between us. Then, without another word, he stormed toward the door. His footsteps echoed down the hall, each one pounding like a drumbeat of finality. When the door shut, I sank onto the couch, my whole body trembling. I'd waited my entire life to be seen, to be heard, and now that I was, it came at the cost of breaking my brother's illusions. Was I cruel? Maybe. But cruelty and truth often look alike when you've lived too long in denial. Later that night, I got a text from Ethan. Just one line. "Don't bother calling. You're dead to me." I stared at the screen, my chest tightening, tears burning the corners of my eyes. For all his flaws, he was still my brother. And losing him, even on his terms, hurt more than I expected. But beneath the ache, there was relief too. Relief that I had finally spoken my truth. Relief that I no longer had to live as the invisible sister in Ethan's shadow. And as painful as it was, I knew this confrontation wasn't the end. Because when Ethan walked out that door, I also knew my parents wouldn't be far behind. It had been 3 weeks since Ethan stormed out of my apartment. 3 weeks of silence so heavy it felt like a second skin. I hadn't heard from him, not a text, not a call. At first, I checked my phone constantly, half expecting another angry message, half hoping for an apology that never came. Eventually, the silence settled into something else, an ache, yes, but also a strange kind of peace. Until the knock came. This time, it wasn't frantic or angry. It was steady, measured. When I opened the door, my parents stood there. My mother clutched her purse like it might float her through the storm, and my father's jaw was set so tightly it looked painful. I knew instantly this wasn't a social call. We sat in my living room, the same place Ethan had raged weeks before. My parents perched on the edge of the couch, their posture stiff, their faces drawn. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Finally, my mother broke the silence. "Madeline," she said softly, "we're sorry. We didn't realize how much you'd accomplished. You surprised us at that dinner." Her words might have meant something if not for the hesitation in her voice, the way her eyes darted toward my father as if checking whether she was saying the right thing. I folded my hands in my lap. "You didn't realize because you never asked." My father sighed heavily, like a man carrying the weight of the world. "We just want to make things right. Ethan's struggling. He's been out of work for weeks. He's depressed, drinking too much. He needs a lifeline. And you're in a position to help him." There it was. The real reason for their visit. Not pride. Not reconciliation. A plea for me to fix the golden boy one more time. I stared at them, heat rising in my chest. Memories flooded back, every rent check I'd covered, every bill I'd paid, every quiet sacrifice that had gone unnoticed. "Do you realize," I said slowly, my voice trembling, "that I've been supporting this family for years? The mortgage, the car, Ethan's rent, I covered all of it. And not once did you ask how I could afford it. Not once did you say thank you." My mother's lips parted, but no words came. My father looked down at his hands. "And now," I continued, "the moment you discover who I am, what I've built, the only thing you want is for me to rescue Ethan again. You don't see me. You see a safety net." My father's head snapped up, eyes flashing. "That's not fair. We love you, Maddie." I met his gaze steadily. "Then why didn't you show it? Why did I have to build an entire company, make millions, and get recognized by strangers before you even noticed me?" The words hung in the air like smoke. For a long time, no one spoke. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. My father rubbed his temples. And I sat there, my heart hammering, knowing this was the moment, the line I could never uncross. Finally, I said it. "I can't save Ethan anymore. I won't hire him. I won't bankroll him. He has to stand on his own." My mother gasped, as if I'd struck her. "But he's your brother. Yes, I said, my voice breaking, and I'm your daughter. But that never seemed to matter as much. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Eventually, they stood. My father's face was hard, my mother's eyes red. At the door, my father said quietly, almost bitterly, "You'll regret this. Family is all we have." I swallowed the lump in my throat. Family should feel like love, not obligation. They left without another word. I watched from the window as they walked to their car, the rain beginning to fall, their figures shrinking in the distance. When the taillights disappeared, I sank onto the couch, tears spilling freely. I'd drawn the line I'd been too afraid to draw my whole life. And it hurt. God, it hurt. But beneath the grief, there was something else. Freedom. The weeks that followed were quiet. Too quiet sometimes. I threw myself into work, into Hayes Analytics, into the company that had become not just my career but my proof that I existed, that I mattered. There were nights when loneliness gnawed at me, when I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake, when I almost picked up the phone to call Ethan or my parents. But then I'd remember the years of invisibility, the endless giving, the hollow praise. And I'd put the phone back down. Because sometimes, choosing yourself means losing the people who never really chose you. One evening, as I walked through the office after a long day, I paused at the glass wall overlooking the city. Lights twinkled across the skyline, cars moved like veins of light below, and for the first time, I let myself feel proud. Not for Ethan. Not for my parents. For me. I had built this. From a dingy apartment with peeling paint and pizza boxes to a company changing the face of finance. I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to the world. And finally, not to myself. But here's the truth I can't shake. Sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and success feels strangely hollow, I wonder, did I do the right thing? Was I heartless for cutting off my family? Or was I finally right to protect myself? What would you have done if you were me?